Our first presenter started as a consultant working with HMRC, then smart meters, before accidentally becoming a developer. She was the tech lead at Go Cardless and recently joined as employee number 2 at Incident.io. Her name is Lisa Karlin Curtis, and the title of her presentation is Using Incidents to Level Up Your Teams. Welcome, Lisa. The stage is yours.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to get going. All right, I think we're good. So hi, welcome to day 2 of Crafthub. Hope you guys are all doing great. I'm going to start with a story. I'm working at Go Cardless. We've got this API, which is basically our whole product, and it suddenly got really slow. So I'm a pretty curious person, and I jumped into the incident channel. We figured out that there was a particular endpoint causing the issue by issuing a bad query to our Postgres database, which was now struggling. We disabled the bad endpoint to get the rest of the system up and running, and that worked. We were in better shape. Our metrics returned to normal, apart from the endpoint that was not in fact working at all. Next, we needed to understand what had happened. There weren't any recent changes that looked suspicious. It turned out that the query plan, and we'll come back to that, for this particular query had changed from something that was expensive but manageable to something that was expensive and not at all manageable. To make matters worse, there wasn't a timeout on this particular query. And what that means is the database was basically going to keep desperately trying to answer this very, very difficult question long after whoever was asking had actually given up on ever getting an answer. We made a subtle change to the query, which made the database revert to the good query plan. Everything was back up and running. We'd fixed it. Well, I say we. I watched quietly from the sidelines, furiously taking notes. After the incident was over, I turned to a senior engineer who was sitting next to me. What is a query plan exactly? We'll come back to that story in a second. First of all, hey, I'm Lisa Karlin Curtis. Last year, I joined Incident.io as employee number 2. We build incident management tooling for your whole organization. And incidents and incident response are very, very close to my heart. And really, this is a talk about why. I've accelerated my personal career by running towards the fire. When I joined Go Cardless, I was pretty junior. I progressed very rapidly. And to be honest, I made senior quite a bit faster than I'd expected. I started reflecting on how that had happened. And of course, it was a number of factors, but a pattern did stand out. The big step changes in my understanding and my ability to solve larger, more complex problems, they all came as a result of incidents that I had either observed or participated in. During these incidents, I was introduced to new technologies, I learned new skills, I met people who became some of my closest friends, and every single time I'd come out as a better engineer. And this is really why I love incidents. Incidents broaden your horizons. As engineers, we inhabit a world full of black boxes. Whether that's a programming language, a framework, or a database, we learn how to use the interface and we move on. If we tried to understand how everything worked, all the way down to the metal and the transistors in your computer, we'd never get to ship, well, anything. Incidents force you to open those black boxes around you and peek inside, opening them just enough to solve the specific problem. So after this incident, I read up on query plans, and it proved really important. This was not the last time we had a query plan related incident. And it was also really useful when I was building new stuff. I was suddenly able to write code that scaled well the first time, rather than relying on trial and error. Seeing this stuff in real life helped me see into the crystal ball and truly understand the impact of the trade-offs that we were making. Incidents give you great signal about which of these black boxes are worth opening, and they give you a real-world example that you can use as a starting point. This all becomes even more important when you join a bigger team. At the start, you learn about the parts of your system that your team owns, that you work with day to day. Maybe you get given a kind of 1,000-foot view in your onboarding, but mostly you pick up the context from the bottom up, as and when you encounter new things. You'll find that incidents don't respect team boundaries. They often impact things that are owned by multiple teams, or hit you just at the crack where there's something has fallen in between two teams. And that's really important. As you grow in the organization, you're going to need to put the puzzle pieces together and have more and more context about the various different things that are happening in your engineering org. And incidents are a really important way to do that. Incidents teach you to build systems that fail gracefully. One of the key follow-ups from this API incident was to add statement timeouts on all of our database calls. This means that if we did issue a bad query, Postgres would try for a few seconds and then give up, and so everything else could continue as normal. If we'd had that before, our incident would have been much less severe. Just one endpoint would have stopped working instead of the whole API. This is an excellent example of resilient engineering. Our system can now handle unexpected failures. We don't need to know what is going to issue a bad query, just that it's likely that something will. It's possible to read about these ideas in a book, but nothing compares to seeing it in action. During this incident, I learned a whole set of tools that I could employ to try and reduce the blast radius of issues like this. Not just the statement timeouts which we actually implemented, but all of the other options that the team discussed and then discarded. And I now have an understanding of the trade-offs between them as well. And incidents provide this unique opportunity for genuine blue sky thinking. A doctor never wants to amputate someone's arm, but when they choose to, it's probably because the alternative is a lot worse. In an incident, nothing is off the table. When you're already in a bad place, sometimes you have to make something worse to make other things better. During our API incident, we disabled an entire endpoint. That feels like a terrible idea, but in context, it was the right decision, the lesser of two evils. Incidents give you this rare opportunity to think without any constraints. A degraded service is far better than a completely absent one. So we're now going to talk about a slightly different story, which is from my time before I was an engineer. I worked on the UK smart meter rollout, and at the time, and arguably still now, it was not going particularly well. There was this second generation of meters coming through, and there was a lot of pressure to start installing them as quickly as we possibly could. Before we installed a meter, we had to register it with a central system, which is called the DCC. And there was a portal, and we had to upload a CSV file with the serial numbers of all the meters alongside some other relevant information, the make, the model, that kind of thing. So the first 10 meters arrived, and our code created this CSV. We uploaded it to the portal, and a few minutes later, we got an email confirming that our meters had been registered. No problems. We got to work installing them in friends and family homes. A few weeks later, our next batch of meters arrived, about 1,000 of them, for us to really get started. We had a bunch of installation appointments booked, and we needed to get going as soon as we could. The meters were already late, and we were behind schedule. Our system created a similar CSV file, and we uploaded it to the portal. We received an email a few minutes later, just saying, "This file is invalid. We have not processed it." We tried generating the file again. We received the same response. We looked at the file ourselves. We couldn't see anything wrong with it. It looked pretty much the same as the last one. We asked the DCC for more information. Could they tell us anything about what was making the file invalid? Was it the whole file? Was it a particular row? Had they recently made a change to their criteria? They didn't reply. We checked everything we could think of, comparing the smaller file to the larger one, but we couldn't see anything different. We couldn't afford to sit and do nothing. We had these appointments booked and we needed to install the meters. So we started on a trial and error approach. We chopped the file up manually and, honestly, quite dangerously, into 20 separate files and uploaded them one by one to the portal. 19 of them were processed successfully. Great, we've got some meters we can use. But one of them was still failing. So now we were getting somewhere. Just a quick tangent about how smart meters work. Each meter has a unique serial number that's 8 pairs of hex digits. So when printed on a meter, it looks like this. So far, so good. The file specification didn't expect any hyphens, so our system removed them when creating the CSV. Again, that looked perfectly sensible. So the file we're uploading looks something like this. I happened to open the file in Excel, just to have a look at it, see if I could see anything on another pass. And if you scroll down to the right bit, something rather strange happens. One of the serial numbers didn't look like the others. I stared at it for a while. Honestly, I was pretty confused. And then the penny dropped. The serial number happened to contain all numeric digits, except for a single letter E. When you open the CSV in Excel, it tries to parse each cell individually. It finds this, and it thinks it's scientific notation. The E stands for exponential, to the power of. And so the whole cell must represent a number. Not just a number, it's a really big number, like a hilariously big number. And this was the root of our problem. Through more trial and error, we discovered that by adding an apostrophe to the start of the problematic serial number, we could fix the issue. Excel interpreted this as a string, and our file was successfully processed. Magic. I never did find out what was going on behind the curtain at the DCC. We told them about what we'd found, and they replied with a generic thank you. But given that the likelihood of a GUID looking like this is so small, it's entirely possible that that bug is still there today. I didn't know it at the time, but I just had a great lesson in the value of observability. Something in the DCC's process must have involved parsing our CSV using Excel or something similar. Then, some code was coming across this hilariously large number, where it was expecting a serial number and failing to process the file. If we'd known which rows specifically were failing to be processed, we could have isolated the problem much more quickly. That would have avoided the scary manual processes we had to use to chop up the files, which could easily have caused us more problems down the line. Even better, if the processor had returned an error saying, I expected a serial number, but I received this enormous number, we'd have known exactly what to do straight away. Incidents teach you to make systems easier to debug. Observability isn't easy. I've shipped plenty of useless log lines and metrics. To build genuinely observable systems, you need to have empathy for your future self or teammate who'll be debugging an issue. And that's hard to learn in abstract. For example, if I ever write code that's going to process a list of rows, I'll now always be sure to report which row failed, if I possibly can. I can do the same for anything that's going to do the same thing lots of times. I can extrapolate. And if someone asks me why it's important, I can tell them the story of the serial numbers. The people I've met who do observability really well are leaning on their experience of debugging issues. They're pattern matching on the things they've seen before, allowing them to identify the right places for logs and metrics. Incidents are a great shortcut to get this kind of experience and build a repository of patterns that you can then recognize going forwards. One more story for you. Back at Go Cardless, after I'd been there a bit longer, I ended up helping with another incident. This time, one of our partners was telling us that they couldn't add new customers to our platform. That's not good. What was more worrying was that we could see that they were adding new customers to our platform. Very not good. Me and their account manager, Kate, got on a call with them to try and learn more. They couldn't process our API responses. Specifically, they discovered that the headers on our HTTP responses were suddenly coming through in all lowercase, but they'd expected them to be in title case. Because of the way that they built their systems, it would take a few days for them to deploy a fix. So could we possibly fix it for them? Technically, we were correct. By the book, HTTP headers should never be treated as case sensitive. But that wasn't relevant here. This was one of our biggest partners telling us their software was broken and that only we could fix it. I pulled in the infrastructure on-call engineer to take a look. I was very much out of my depth. We spent the next few hours together trying to understand why the behavior had suddenly changed. And during this, I kept liaising back with Kate and talking to the partner directly. After a few false starts, we identified that we'd upgraded a component which had changed this behavior. That meant we could revert the change. Excellent. And then our headers would once again be title cased. Me and Kate gave the partner the good news and then spent the rest of the day working with them to reconcile their own system to get everything back on track. It was a tiring day, but a rewarding one. Incidents build your network. They provide a great opportunity to meet people outside your team and forge strong relationships along the way. As psychologists have known for a while, there's something about going through a stressful situation with someone that forges a connection far more quickly than normal. Kate, the account manager during the lowercasing incident, turned out to be a really important person to know. She was a great human being. She was also the account manager for some of our biggest partners, meaning that she had unique insights into what they wanted and how we could serve them better. Before the incident, I'm embarrassed to say, I didn't even know her name. Incidents are great for building these relationships in the wider company. Most of the non-engineering folks I met at GoCardless, I met during incidents, and those relationships were really valuable. They gave me a mental map of how the rest of the org worked and meant that I had a friendly face that I could talk to when I needed advice. As I became more senior, that network became increasingly important, as I was responsible for larger and larger projects that impacted multiple teams. And incidents are a chance to learn from the best. When things go really wrong, people from all over the org get pulled in to help fix it. But they're not just any people. They're the people with the most context, the most experience, the most skill, who everyone trusts to fix the problem. They have the technical know-how to enter unknown territory. Getting to spend time with these folks is rare. They're likely to be some of the busiest people in the company. Incidents provide a unique opportunity to learn from them and see firsthand how they approach a challenging problem. During the lowercasing incident, I spent most of the day with the infrastructure on-call engineer, a guy called Lawrence Jones. Lawrence was one of the most senior and well-respected engineers in the whole of GoCardless. I learned so much from watching him break down the problem, looking at recent changes and running tests to gather evidence. And it's funny how things work out. I now work very closely with him at Incident.io, and he's still pretty great. For me, all these incidents gave me opportunities to learn much faster than I otherwise would have. Incidents have unusually high information density compared with day-to-day work, and they enable you to piggyback on the experience of others. It's well understood that responding to incidents makes you better at responding to more incidents. But it's less obvious how much better it makes you at all the other things that you do in your job. Who knows how long it might have been before I'd realized that I really ought to know what a query plan was. Probably until my own code broke production in the same way. It's quite a slow way of learning if you have to wait for you personally to make all of these mistakes. At Go Cardless, I was lucky. Their culture and processes meant that I could see incident channels and follow along, giving me this opportunity to accelerate. But that's not always the case. Some teams run incidents in private channels by default, operating an invite-only policy. That means that junior members who want to observe rather than participate might not even be aware that they're happening. Sometimes people are excluded for other reasons. It's not culturally encouraged to get involved. There's an in-group who handle all the incidents, and everyone else should just get out of the way. Joining that in-group, even coming in as a very experienced engineer, can become almost impossible. To build a culture where everyone can learn from incidents, we need to start making them accessible. So how do we do that? First, declare lots of incidents. If you only declare incidents when things get really bad, you won't get a chance to practice your incident process. That means you won't be as good at running incidents, and also that there won't be as many learning opportunities for your team. By lowering the bar for what counts as an incident, when the really bad ones do come around, the response is a well-oiled machine. Everyone knows what the process is, how to declare an incident in the first place, how to get the right people into the room, how to use the company's tools to collaborate effectively. You don't want to be wasting time trying to figure out how to update your status page while the database is actually down. Declaring lots of incidents also helps with learning. When problems are handled as incidents, it makes them accessible to those who aren't directly involved from the beginning. Encourage everyone to participate. As we've discussed, incidents are great learning opportunities, and they should be accessible to everyone. Incident channels should be public by default, private only when it's absolutely necessary, such as for security incidents. And engagement in those incident channels should be encouraged for members at all levels. There can be too much of a good thing here. Having 20 people descend into every minor incident channel may not be a great outcome. But most incidents can comfortably accommodate a few junior responders tagging along. It doesn't have to come at the cost of a good response either. Responders can gather these experiences in a low-risk environment by asking questions to someone who's not actively working on the incident, or doing what I did and saving them up for after it's resolved. There are also other ways to gather learnings. Reading debrief documents or attending post-incident reviews are both great ways of getting value from your team's incidents. Try compiling a list of the best incident debriefs at your company to share with everyone as part of their onboarding. Maybe even include some public postmortems too. We all know which were the most interesting incidents. Why not share the love with the new joiners? As for public debriefs, I'd highly recommend listening to the Downtime Project podcast. It's a great walkthrough of a range of fascinating incidents, and it covers a lot of ground in quite a short set. Get into the habit of showing you're working. In an incident, you should always put as much information as you can into the incident log, which is probably a Slack channel or something similar. What command did you run? What theory have you disproved? If you're debugging on your own, this can admittedly feel a bit strange. I've been sat at 10 p.m. in an incident channel on more than one occasion, having a delightful conversation with myself, but it is worth it, I promise. It's useful for your response, as it means you don't have to rely on your memory to know exactly what you've already done, which helps avoid bad assumptions. It makes handing over easier if you need to take a step back, or the incident escalates and others need to get involved. Everyone can just pick up where you left off. But it's also beneficial for your teams. If this information is accessible, you're enabling everyone to learn from your experience. You're leveling them up. Tacit knowledge, which is stuff people just know, runs rife when you're building a product at speed. And incidents can help keep your team on the same page. Debugging trails are a fantastic source of information, both on the particular problem being investigated and the processes and tools that you're using to debug. Almost everything that I know about how to use our observability setup at Incident.io was from watching other people debug issues in incident channels. Practically speaking, that means posting logs, error messages, screenshots of graphs and traces, and exactly what you're thinking into the incident channel at all stages, so someone else can come along and see where you're at. And finally, watch out for anybody playing the hero. Often, a single engineer takes on a lot of the incident response burden, fixing everything before anyone knows it's broken. Maybe that was you. Maybe it still is. This probably won't end well for you as the hero. The hero will stop getting as much credit as they expect for fixing everything as it becomes normalized and are at risk of burning out. But it also causes problems for the rest of the team. The hero won't share their Legos. Without meaning to, the hero is taking away these learning opportunities from everyone else by fixing things quietly in the corner. That means that nobody else is ever going to be able to do what they do as effectively. No one's had enough practice. While that's perhaps an effective job preservation tactic, it's not going to result in a high-performing team. If you think you get a lot of recognition for resolving incidents, imagine how much you'll get if you can level up your entire team to do the same. So making incidents accessible is all about having incidents in public spaces and having a central repository that people can access incidents. I am biased, but I do think having an incident management tool is really, really useful for that. And I'd highly recommend everybody checks out the various tools there are, obviously ours including. So thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate you coming along. If you're interested in incidents in general, we have a Slack community at incident.io/community, which I highly recommend you join. And I'm also on Twitter at @PatRicatiEng if you'd like to chat about anything that we've discussed today. I really hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And I think there's a chance for some questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Lisa. Wow, that was very interesting. And here I thought it was going to be about something totally to do with programming, but this is actually, I think this applies across not just programming, but across any type of industry, any type of work that you do where you can learn from other people's mistakes and do things. So great presentation. I loved it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this stuff definitely isn't particularly engineering specific at all.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I want to remind the audience that any questions you have for Lisa, you can ask them on Slido right now, or you can ask them later. And if she's on Hopin, she can look at them later and answer them for you. But right now we have some opportunity. We have about 10 minutes. So please ask your questions. Only thing I'd like to add to this, if it's helps you any, is I was in the military and working on aircraft, and there we had sort of an incident book, and anything that was learned from any aircraft mishap or operational usage or anything went into a huge book, and this is what people relied on. If something happened, they could go to this book, look at it, and then resolve, or at least have an understanding of what caused the problem and what you needed to do to try to resolve the problem. So, wow, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, there's a load of stuff that's been written. A lot of stuff from aviation, from medicine has come into sort of engineering incident response as well, because those are the people who do it best, right? Because the stakes are so high, you have to get it right.
Absolutely. We'll give it one more minute. You know, if people wanted to ask questions, they would right now, they would ask them by now. I don't see anything coming in on Slido. So you're going to be around, right, for the remainder of the day. Are you going to be listening to any of the other presentations or anything like that?
I'm going to be dipping in and out. It's actually a bank holiday over here in the UK, so I'm away with my in-laws. But there are a couple I wanted to check out.
Okay, very good. Then I won't keep you any longer, just to have you here. Thank you again for your presentation. Truly enjoyable. And enjoy the Queen's Jubilee.
Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.